to the Journey to Forever podcast, where we discuss the highs and lows of life and love. Join us, your hosts, Flo and
Joe,
for a weekly recalculation of our roots as we navigate the twists and turns with candid conversation, comfort food, and laughter. Hey Forever family, welcome back to another episode of the Journey to Forever podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Flo, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Joe.
Yes, and we have another great, enticing episode for you today. The title of today's episode is Love Lessons. But as always, before we hit the road on our topic, we always begin our podcast episode with a bit of reminiscing. So, Joe, you ready for your story question?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. Got a story to share about a memorable tunnel you've been through or a memorable bridge you've crossed?
Oh, yeah. That would be a memorable bridge. Remember the first time I went to New York and I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. That was like, wow, I've only seen this thing on postcards on TV. Remember that show, Taxi?
Yes.
And you have the taxi going across the bridge. That was the most memorable time I can remember. Memorable. Biggest thing I've ever seen. Like, wow. You know, you're actually looking around. You know, I've seen like tourists, they say they're always looking up.
Yeah.
That was me. I was only looking up. So, yeah, that was my memorable bridge.
Yeah, I could see that being very memorable. All right. So, do you have a question for me?
Yes. Got a question to share about loss or losing someone else in a large crowd.
Yeah, sticking with New York. So, one of my trips to New York with my mother in the early 90s, we went shopping, as Trinis used to do back in those days. And we were supposed to get out in a particular stop. I can't remember which stop, somewhere in Manhattan. And as per usual with the New York subway, there's a lot of people exiting the subway car at any given moment. So I managed to get off, but the doors closed before my mother and her friend were able to exit. So I was like, what on earth? And if you've ever been in a New York crowd, you know, the crowd just somehow seems to move you. And I'm like, no, but I can't go because my mom is still on the subway. So I turned around just in time to see her pointing to something behind me. As I turned around, there was a transit police officer. So I didn't say anything to him, but I just literally stood next to him and waited for her to come get me. So yeah, for me, that was being lost because if you know what Trinidad, the size of Trinidad, you'd understand that for a 12-year-old girl in New York City by herself, that was scary.
Yes, and you know Trinidad could probably fit into New York.
Many times, many times.
Hey, moving on, what's next on the agenda?
So, we're going to get into the meat of today's episode. And we both really like music, but unfortunately, because of copyrighting reasons, we can't necessarily play songs in our podcast. But I'll just share the bridge or some lyrics from a song that I think is very apt to this episode. It's Daughters by John Mayer. The lyrics go like this. Fathers, be good to your daughters. Daughters will love like you do. Girls become lovers who turn into mothers. So mothers, be good to your daughters too. And I'm sure you know that song because it was a very popular song by John Mayer. And I think it's extremely relevant to my first love lesson because lo and behold, that lesson comes from my relationship with my father.
Fathers and their daughters.
Yeah, and there's no shame in saying growing up, I was a daddy's girl. So, this is me, preteen, and on my way to school one day. secondary school, my grandpa is driving me to school, which was a special occasion for me because I typically traveled to school. So I was very excited to be in the front passenger seat of his car, being driven to school, and I'm peering out the window, just taking in all the sights. And lo and behold, I see someone walking towards the car, a ways away, but I could make out it's a woman and she has something in her arms. Something about that figure seems to connect to me. I'm drawn to it. I can't help but focus on the figure. And as we get closer to the person, I recognize, oh my goodness, it's her. And what she's holding in her hands is a baby. So instantly, tears began running down my face. I get to school. My grandpa dropped me off to school. I tried to hide the tears from him because I didn't necessarily know what I saw. Remember, this is just me making assumptions based on a person that I saw in the road. So I got to school, but in my heart of hearts, I know the truth. So I spent the entire morning crying to the point where I didn't even go to my classes. Meaning, in secondary school, we typically would have to move from our home classroom to another classroom for a particular subject. I stood there with my head down, crying all morning. Eventually, they called my mother. My mother comes to pick me up. We get home. I'm too distraught to speak to her. Eventually, I let her know what I saw. So she gets in contact with my father. Can't remember if it's that same evening or a few days later, but he eventually came to my mother's house and I questioned him about it. Hey, is so-and-so's child yours? And I can see that he's really stunned by the question because he didn't expect me to ask. I don't think we were supposed to know. We, meaning my siblings and I. And he's like, what? And I'm like, is so-and-so's child yours? And he freezes. He probably says something to the effect of, what does that have to do with you or something like that? So then I ask, are you saying to me what you do doesn't affect me as your child? And his response was, stay out of big people's business.
Stay out of grown folks' business.
While that may be true in some ways, for me, the lesson that I learned from that conversation, because I don't think he intended to be mean in his response, but it did hurt. And in that moment, I recognized that even if we don't intend to, what we do and say affects those who love us. So oftentimes it is good and the best thing to be upfront and have that communication. Because I could think of many ways where that knowledge, him sharing the birth of his child,
your sister, brother,
his child, would have gone over a lot more smoothly if he was upfront about it. So, that being said, yeah, eventually we work through all of those things, but that really did hurt at that point in time. Yeah, that's a love lesson.
That's the lesson.
Yeah.
The lesson is that what someone else does deeply can affect others.
For sure.
Okay. Let's see. What has been my love lesson over the years? Well, I've learned that love surpasses the test of time. No matter two people are not meant to be together at one period in time, you never know that further down in the same lifetime, they come back together like they were never apart.
Okay.
I saw that with my grandparents. So I know that love is a very technical thing, very, very technical. You never know what is going to happen at what time. So, yeah. I believe that everything happens at the right moment for the right reasons. Not all the time you will be able to understand it, but it usually works out.
So that means if you love someone and for whatever reason you and that person can't necessarily be together, then live in hope that sometime in the future that you could possibly be back together again?
It's possible. I wouldn't say live in hope. Just let life move on and move you.
Mm-hmm.
Because probably at that point in time, the two of you were not in the same headspace.
Okay.
Probably wanted different things. Probably had different expectations in life. Until a couple years may pass, couple months may pass, who knows? And then at that point in time, with growth and understanding, you realize, hey, this is what I want. And it's the same thing that other person wants. And that other person just at that point in time realizes because of some situation that, hey, this is what I want. And you all just happen to bounce back up and like you all will never apart. And you all are happier at that point in time.
Okay. I hear that.
Don't force it. That's basically the love lesson. Don't force it.
Oh yeah, love shouldn't be forced at all. And you're on the risk of not being loved.
At all.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know somebody who I don't have to force to love in any sort of way, who is my mama. And she is the source of my second love lesson.
Well, because that's your first true love.
Mm-hmm. She loved me before I even knew her.
That's right.
Yeah, so my parents separated when I was pretty young, and because of that, I ended up growing up in a multi-generational household. And that household had aunts, uncles, my grandparents, and some of my family members migrated. And if you think back to the 80s in Trinidad, it was pretty commonplace for people to migrate to the US, the UK in search of a better life. People still do it to this day. My mom was often encouraged to do that because, hey, she's now a single parent raising children on her own. Who knows what the land of opportunity may hold for her. But I always remember having conversations with her. She'd gather all of us on her bed and she'd just talk to us. And I remember her saying to me distinctly once, yeah, you all are my responsibility. Like, I decided to bring you all into this world and I'm not going to leave you all for anything. And I really, really appreciated her for making that choice because I'm sure it wasn't easy to say, okay, I'm going to stay here and work and provide for these children, by whatever legal means that I can, as tough as it may be, because my grandparents were willing to do that. They did that for some cousins of mine. So it wasn't something that far-fetched, but she always said, no, you all are my responsibility. And for me, what I learned from that is sometimes we may be given responsibilities in this life because of loving someone, something, and sometimes the going gets a little bit difficult.
That's life. Yeah.
But in everything, we should find a way to be loyal to that person, those people, because we made a commitment to those people that we would be there. And if you understand the meaning of loyalty, it means sticking to that person or thing until the commitment is fulfilled, more or less. So my mother recognized her in deciding to have us. Her commitment was to raise us into adults. So she wasn't going to give up on that no matter how hard it was. And for me, I view that as very important because based on all the examples I've seen, marriage is not going to be an easy thing.
Never is. I've heard stories.
Yes. So when you say I do, and in sickness and in health, it means that there are going to be tough times, but you don't just give up. You understand? You remain loyal to those vows that you take, the commitment you made. Whenever you've made that commitment, it doesn't have to be something as legal as, all right, we actually get formally married. But if you decide to be in a relationship, for instance, you've committed to being with that person.
Yes. I can understand that. So, for my other lesson was a lesson of patience. I learned that at an early age from my mother. She says that I have patience, but I could only give it to her for having patience. I have to give her all the props, all the praises for me having patience now, because she's been through some tough times, and it's only by being patient and the power of prayer make me to understand that yes, life does change with those two things. So my father was difficult to deal with. Yes, he's a liberal. Stubborn. But I can understand where he was coming from, but not everyone could deal with him. And my mother, she dealt with it. And she smiled through the whole thing. And she would have been a very strong woman about it, No matter how difficult it is, my mother was always there. So that patience and prayer, that was my lesson. Because only that way she was able to love my father.
Right.
Because she was patient and she prayed a lot. So that was my lesson over the years as a child growing up, and to this day it has stuck with me.
Okay, so I depend on that patience and prayer in the future. I'll lay my cards on the table now. I'll try not to be stubborn and difficult, but
you're safe. He's not liberal.
All right. So the third love lesson is based on the other man from my first love lesson, my grandfather. He was my maternal grandfather, that is. He was somebody who was a hero in my childhood. He still is my hero, even though he's no longer here on earth. And I remember Saturday morning specifically going to the market with my mother, and as we exited the taxi and made our way to the market, and even during the streets, she, from time to time, she would stop and have a conversation with someone, and she would say, hey, this is Auntie so-and-so, this is Uncle so-and-so, meaning it's her aunt or uncle. And therefore, I think my great aunt or great uncle, because they were half siblings of my grandfather. And I'd always ask, but how they come? They look so different. Yes, I know siblings from the same parents could be different, because that's the case with me and my siblings, but these were very different people. So she would say, oh, that's grandpa's brother with, by this, and the other.
She would describe the pumpkin vine.
The extended family. And then I understood from those conversations that my great-grandpa had many children. And what I appreciated from that history lesson and knowing my grandfather was that his father's story didn't have to be his, because he decided to have all his children with one woman, and they were partners for life, and I take from that my parents' stories, meaning their experience with love relationships, doesn't have to be mine. You could make of love and relationships whatever you want it to be. And the smartest thing to do is to learn from the mistakes of others and definitely not repeat them.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely a good thing to learn from another person's mistakes. You don't always have to learn to learn.
Yep.
All right. What's next?
That's my last lesson, unless you have something else to share.
No, I believe I share my most important lessons that stick with me today.
Okay.
So,
Well, all that talking has me hungry. So you have something to eat?
oh yeah, thing to eat. Well, this weekend is a weekend of experimentation. What's on the menu? Chicken Parmesan. So fancy. Yes. This is very interesting, folks. Let's just say we are putting a twist on the usual thing to eat. We have never cooked this before, and this is a story in the making. It is happening as we are doing this podcast at this moment. So stay tuned. There will be a part 2 in a subsequent podcast to let you know how this goes down. But let's just say it smells awesome. And in another matter, beaches has reopened.
Beaches have reopened.
Yes, beaches have reopened. So there is a shark and bake very close. Very, very close. Stay tuned for that.
Listen, you tempted me to jump in the car and drive straight to the beach now, you know.
Not in that traffic.
I know, because I'm sure everybody is heading that way now.
Everyone and their dog is heading to the beach at this moment. So we'll go at a later date.
Yep, definitely. Well, that's all for this episode. As usual, you can give us feedback on this episode, this topic. Feel free to share your love lessons with us at Journey to Forever TT on Instagram.
No, but wait, there's one other thing.
What's that?
What filled your love tank this week?
Oh my goodness. I am so excited to try this chicken parmesan. I totally forgot about filling love tanks.
So, what did it feel this week?
What filled my love tank this week? I can't think of anything right off the cuff.
People, Flo's love tank is running on empty.
No, my love tank is not running on empty. I think it's overflowing. That's why I'm overwhelmed. I'm not running on empty. Trust me.
Okay, think about it. Let's see. What filled my love tank this week actually ties into what we did earlier with the love lessons. And it's your patience that I've been working like 7 days a week. And folks, I haven't been stabbed or assaulted yet because work is picking up so much of my time. She is still very much patient with me for not being around as much. So I am so grateful and happy for that. So thank you.
Yeah, it just makes me cherish the time that we do get to spend together even more.
Oh, nice. So my love tank is filled.
That's great. Ooh. All right. So this is not my primary love language. And yes, there is an episode on love languages coming up. But acts of service, I have to say thank you for fixing the kitchen sink. Well, the tap on the kitchen sink. Yes, that was an unexpected surprise. And I'm glad that you did.
You know, I'm all about surprises.
Yes.
All right, folks. That's it for this week. Hope we'll see y'all. Well, sorry. We hope we'll hear y'all again one day. Most likely we will see y'all. So thank you for joining us. Where can we be reached, Flo?
Journey to Forever TT on Instagram. Follow us. Send us some messages.
Join us there, folks. Have a good one. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your month. Hope to hear from you all again. Have a great one.
Ciao.